Hello there and welcome to Terrace Scottish Football Podcast. My name is Shaughan McGuigan and on this occasion I am joined by Daily Record's snooker correspondent Fraser Clarke. Fraser, how are you?
I'm very well. We were having a nice conversation about a man having basically a meltdown in a snooker match that I was writing about today and just clattering about so loudly and telling a referee to shut up, which was great.
But yeah, you're now the Daily Record's snooker expert.
Yeah, I've accidentally become the go-to guy for snooker. So when I started my new job under a month ago, I didn't really know anything about snooker other than one of my pals was really into it. So when I got asked, could you watch the snooker? I thought, yeah, it's fine. Like if Chris is into it, I'll be able to keep an eye on it. Watched it, and since then I've turned out in the region of 20 articles on snooker, and whenever a snooker story comes in, she's like, oh, Fraser, another one for you. So I'm becoming somewhat of an expert. I won't be on the lower league show much longer because I'll be on some snooker podcasts instead.
You know how I don't like Ronnie O'Sullivan? Was never too keen on him.
Very good for clicks.
Yeah, I can imagine. Big ego.
Yeah. It said today that he won't retire for another decade.
That's not necessarily a bad thing, because what I would like to see from Ronnie O'Sullivan is him losing in like the first rounds of tournaments. So that's fine. If he continues for another 10 years, cool. But I would like to see at some point him losing in the first rounds of tournaments to, like, I don't know, 19-year-old qualifiers. That's what I would like to see. Never been a fan of him, Ronnie O'Sullivan.
He's very difficult to find a picture of him in our system where he isn't pulling a funny face.
Just loves pulling funny faces.
It's just his face at this stage. It's not even funny. It's just his face.
Do you know something? I was trying to remember the last time we did a podcast together. It must have been a long time ago. Did we do the first one or two lists from the end of last season, or was it before that?
I can't remember. How many lists did I do with Sean Elderbrandt? Because I feel like I did a fair few with him.
You might have done all of them. You might have done. So it might have been even longer than that. Might have been even longer than that. Because I'm interested. What I'm interested, you know something? I'm interested in terms of you're Scotland's politest man. But it's been so long since I've done a podcast with you. I am interested to see if you are still so polite when we discuss Dumbarton losing 4-0 and 5-1 in successive weeks. I suppose that's what I'm interested to get to.
I probably won't be polite talking about our pitch, put it that way.
And then we'll get to it. We'll get to it when we get to League One. But I did think that was very fun. No, I did think it was very funny. I thought it was very good. Anyway, this is the Lower League Podcast. Craig Telfer can't be here this week. He's been in a snowing accident. I do believe that Craig Fowler is putting out a Kickstarter to try and get us some new Salopets, but hopefully we'll see him back in a week or two. However, we will be, myself and Fraser, will be dipping into the Championship, League One and League Two. It's a bit of a hodgepodge of a podcast this week. I would love to say that's what the intention always was. Actually, we were taken slightly unawares about how many games will take place on the Tuesday night, and we're recording this podcast on the Wednesday. So there's been a slight change of plans, but nevertheless, we will endeavour to get to give you as much interesting opinion as we possibly can. We will be we'll be looking at games individually and looking at some hot topics. I don't know if Russell McLean can ever be a hot topic, but nevertheless, that's the kind of stuff that we will be giving you. I think the most obvious place to start would be Somerset Park. Ayr United 5, Falkirk 2. A number of kind of eye-catching results over the lower leagues over the weekend. I do think this might have been probably the biggest surprise. Ross McKeever gave Falkirk an early lead. There was then a highly contentious red card for Luke Graham after approximately 8 minutes. That consequently has been overturned just this afternoon, funnily enough. After 34 minutes, Conor McLean made it 1-1. However, Falkirk then raced into another 2-1 lead thanks to Alfie Bavidge. However, Ben Dempsey with a fine strike from the edge of the box made it 2-2. And before half-time, Scott McMahon made it 3-2. An absolute plethora of goals before half-time. And then in the second half, a brace from Alfie Bavidge made the point safe for Ayr United. Fraser, I believe you managed to catch the highlights of this. You know something? Who cares what you thought of the game? Let's get to the best bit. What did you think of Luke Graham's red card?
So when I first saw it, my initial thoughts were this is probably a red card and looks worse because it's taken so long to come out. Like, I'm assuming the linesman and the ref were talking to each other and they were trying to come to a consensus in the decision. But it just looked really, really ropey. It looked like nobody really had a clue what they were doing. And it was also such an unusual situation to be in. Like, I can't remember seeing a red card where somebody or where an incident has unfolded in that way. And ultimately, the crux of it comes down to, did George Oakley push Luke Graham's hand into the ball? That's fundamentally like the crux of the whole argument, I think, on whether or not this should or should not have been a red card. But I can't remember ever seeing a player effectively pushing another player's hand onto the ball to cause him to handle it, which is actually quite a good idea when you think about it, because you could probably move a player's hand with a reasonably low amount of force when he's running, and it wouldn't be considered a foul, and then all they see is him slapping the ball, and then the foul gets given in the red card and whatever. So I spoke to one of my colleagues who has asked to remain anonymous, who is a Falkirk fan, for his views, and he said, yeah, it was a stick-on red card, and I don't see why they're bothering appealing it.
Really?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, because he said it's going to come down to whether or not Oakley pushed Graham's hand, and there's no way of proving that. There's no way, if you get Luke Graham there, he's going to say, my hand was pushed, and if you get George Oakley, he'll be like, no, I didn't push him with any force. So he didn't think there was going to be a way that this was going to be overturned. And lo and behold, it was overturned. And then you look at all the reactions from the Falkirk fans on Twitter, it's just been really funny, because they've had such a good time of it, Falkirk, that we've almost forgotten how angry they get when things don't go their favour. And actually, it's quite nice to see it back.
So, like, I messaged you on the Saturday night, and I was like, right, there seems to be some kind of controversy in terms of Luke Graham's red card. Cannot work out what I want, what I prefer, what the preferred option is. Do I want it to be that it was actually, when you see the highlights, it was a definite red card, and all these Falkirk fans are going to have to say, actually, hands up, referee was correct, I was wrong. Because I do that every Saturday. I think it's very funny. Or, actually, if the incident was every bit as bad as what Falkirk fans were describing, and personally, I think it was the latter. I do enjoy the fact that when I was watching it, I thought, right, either that's George Oakley's hand, or he is some kind of puppeteer, and he's like kind of manipulated Luke Graham's hand onto the ball. But I mean, neither. Whatever happened, albeit from one camera angle, I could not think that was a red card. But I suppose the linesman was in a far better position than you or I suppose.
I know exactly what you mean about George Oakley's hand, so I had to watch it back a few times. I was like, wait a minute, does Oakley just punch that? Like, does he do it? And that's why the Falkirk fans are so angry. And to be honest, see if somebody told me, or if he comes out and says, oh, actually I did, if he's talking to his pals and he's just like, yeah, I did actually just punch it, I wouldn't be in the slightest surprised. And I'm assuming that's a large part of what the conversation that sort of delayed the decision so much was. The two of them are basically getting together and going, whose hand was it? Like, are you absolutely sure? Because they, like, from the clip and zooming it in, it's quite difficult to tell. Now, I wouldn't want to have to make that decision when I was also running, also trying to keep an eye on offsides, or, putting one foot in front of the other one and players being round about me or whatever else. So it's a very brave decision to give it, I would say. Like, when you, especially early on, and I know that it shouldn't come into it, but if you're given a red card like that inside the first 10 minutes or so, you have to be 100% sure it's right. And I don't really know how anyone could be 100% sure that's right, because here we are on the Wednesday, watched it back, it's been appealed, the appeal's been won, and I still don't know what the right decision was.
No, I agree. So to make that decision 8 minutes in, surely somebody, whether it was a referee, whether it was the linesman, somebody must have been definitively certain that was the correct decision. I must admit, I've not seen anything, albeit from just one camera angle, and slowed down significantly. I'm not of the opinion it was that. The red card, to be fair, the SFA have said today on the Wednesday afternoon that it wasn't a red card. So Luke Graham will be available to play against Hamilton at home on at the weekend on Saturday, and that's probably a good thing, because albeit Falkirk went down to 10 men within 10 minutes, I didn't think they defended well for the rest of the game.
No, they looked a bit all over the place at the back, which isn't something, I mean, any sort of flaws with Falkirk isn't really something that we've came to expect from them over the past, 2 seasons now, because they have been so good everywhere. I don't know how much you can read into it when you go down to 10 men at that stage, and it maybe does just completely disjoint the game. But yeah, they didn't look good at the back. But like I said, I was watching it and I thought, when you go down to 10 men that early, you almost write the game off. And you think, right, whatever happens here happens. If it ends up 8-2 to Ayr United, I don't think there'd be Falkirk fans who would be that concerned. They'd be more angry with the decision, more angry with the red card, and they can write it off and say, this, we've shown this season that we're a very good team, that we're a defensively pretty adept, solid team, and this isn't much of an issue. But then there is that tiny little bit of you that goes, how many times have we seen our team playing against 10 men and struggling to break them down? And Ayr didn't have that problem at all. I mean, it looked so easy at times.
It's funny, I think there was a wee bit of bickering. There was a good bit of bickering back and forth between Falkirk fans and Ayr fans about how the game kind of panned out afterwards. Because obviously Falkirk had the lead, went down to 10, then goes to 1-up, but then Falkirk immediately go 2-1 up. And I think there was a bit of discussion about how Falkirk played the game out from that point, about whether they were too confident in that they've kind of swept teams aside this season. I do think there was a discussion about whether Cole Donaldson was a correct substitution, even though he was literally the centre half who was on the bench. He looked like, he was just coming back from an injury, and by full time it looked like that injury had reoccurred, and John McGuigan had kind of alluded to that at full time about the fact that maybe Donaldson had been rushed back. So maybe Mackie could have went to centre half, and because I had a couple of fullbacks that could have kind of come onto play. So maybe McLean could have done something there. But ultimately, I think that what everybody said was probably correct in that, yes, red card hugely influenced the game. Falkirk 1-0 up at a time. Would Ayr have won the game? No idea, but I don't think there would have been the kind of collapse from Falkirk that they experienced. Could they have defended set pieces better? Absolutely, of course they done. They could have done. But ultimately, it's a bit harder to defend set pieces when your best centre half has been red carded after 8 minutes. And yes, could John McLean have maybe sharp shop? Potentially, yes, he could have done that. But again, they've been sweeping teams aside, so maybe it's all, again, that's where the benefit of hindsight. So all of those things could be correct. But it was, even when I saw Falkirk go down to 10 men, that kind of result, I suppose, was not what I expected.
No, and I think you've touched on a good point with the set pieces thing, because it works two ways there. So if you take the best centre half out of any team, they're probably going to be more vulnerable from set pieces. It's just a natural thing, because your best centre half is probably going to be the best guy you've got at attacking a ball, probably going to be a big, strong physical unit presence to kind of move people about in the box. So the fact they've conceded 2 from set pieces makes the scoreline look a lot worse, and I think that might also rankle with John McGuigan a wee bit, in terms of, okay, if Ayr are going to open us up, that's one thing. They're going to move players about and basically just take advantage of the additional space, that's one thing. But don't give them cheap goals.
Mm-hmm.
And they give them a couple of cheap goals. So I think that will rankle. But I suppose you can also look at it and say, well, go into any team in the country, take out their centre half, and then say, don't concede from a corner. Probably the chances are going to improve on that side of things. And you do feel as well, like with I think it's the 5th goal, Alfie Bavidge's goal, which is a really good cross from Nick McAllister. Again, if you've got a more natural centre half in there, probably doesn't get that chance, just because they read it a wee bit better and they know how to defend that situation a wee bit more naturally.
Yeah, by that point he's in bags of room, and you're right. And at that point, Falkirk are probably like pushing forward and try to get back in the game when they're 4-2 down. In terms of, let's go to Ayr United, I suppose, because I remember maybe 3 or 4 weeks ago, did a podcast with Telford. They just lost to East Kilbride in the Challenge Cup, and I think both of us were quite scathing, certainly about their performance against East Kilbride, and we wondered about them going forward. They were in a poor run of form. There was a wee bit of pressure on Scott Brown in terms of A, the poor form, B, just lost to East Kilbride. it wasn't just the result against East Kilbride. It was the fact that they were ultimately outplayed by a team in a lower league who a week or two later were completely kind of dominated by Falkirk in the Scottish Cup. So there was definitely pressure, I think, on Scott Brown, and you wondered if they would be the team that would drop out from the top four if anybody was to. However, since then, I think their form's been excellent. So definitely something to be said about how Brown has not necessarily turned it around, but certainly supporters are a wee bit more encouraged about the direction that they're going in.
I think you can't really judge a manager by how he starts. You always judge him by how he turns around a poor run of form. And I think about every single manager I've seen at Dumbarton and how they've been, how their spell has ended up has been judged effectively by how they've turned around that first sticky patch that they faced. And when Scott Brown hit that run of form, coupled with Anton Dowds' injury, which looked like it really knocked them kind of off the rails a wee bit, I thought, I can see Brown maybe going the way of Barry Ferguson here. Being a brilliant player, comes from an old firm background where he's got these standards where he's used to winning every week and being with the best players, and suddenly he's going to be frustrated and he's going to start lashing out, not literally, but just kind of maybe taking his frustration out at players. It's going to bubble over. He won't be a popular figure with the fans, and it'll just kind of, the wheels will all start to fall off. And I didn't see this coming at all. But like the way that he has turned that around, if I was an Ayr fan, I would be hugely, hugely encouraged by, because that shows somebody who has been dealt the kind of tough hand of losing probably their best striker, Anton Dowds, for the season, I think. I mean, I don't think we'll see him back before the end of the year. So you've got Dowds out for the season. You've then had this kind of rocky run of form. I imagine that the K Park crowd, when Scott Brown was leaving from an Ayr United perspective, would have been fairly hostile after that game. Like, he would have been a man who was not popular, who was being heavily doubted. And you know what football fans are like? You then go and win 4 of your next 5 games, and suddenly he's great again. But I think that's really, really encouraging from their point of view. And like you, I had them kind of earmarked to just start to slide down the table. I didn't think they'd be in any danger, but I thought they'd just start to drift away from the kind of leading pack. And now you're looking at it, let's look at it in the bluntest form. They've just beaten Falkirk 5-2. Like, ignore the fact that there was a red card after 9 minutes of the game. They've just beaten Falkirk 5-2. Why would they start to slip down the league now if they can build on this and keep this form going? And if Brown can continue to impress, which 4 weeks ago, didn't feel like something we'd be saying.
Yeah, I mean, like it feels like the division is kind of splitting into 5 and 5. And if there's any contest, certainly at this moment in time, if there's any contest about who might slip into playoffs and who might slip out, feels like it's been between Queen's Park and Partick Thistle. I do wonder about how, like, it still feels like he hasn't really addressed the goalkeeper issue. Like Liam Russell didn't do anything wrong on Saturday, to be fair. Just feels like they don't necessarily have a goalkeeper of a top 4 championship side, I suppose. I think what has proved them to a degree is Mikey Devlin. So he's somebody who joined in the summer, didn't really play much, if at all, potentially, in pre-season. And I think people were starting to wonder if anybody was ever going to see him play in a United jersey. But actually, he's come in the last 4 or 5 weeks and made a pretty big difference at centre-half. Yeah,
and he's someone who's came in on the back of a pretty rubbish spell with Livingston. I mean, I don't think he had a good time there at all. Their fans certainly didn't speak highly of him. So he's somebody who's maybe found that, it's that time in his career where he's dropping the divisions a wee bit, but actually this is suiting him. We'll come on to talk about Livingston later in the podcast, because there's certainly another player from that Livingston team who looked hopelessly out of his depth last season, and then really, really good now that he's dropped down to the Championship. But I mean, you think about Mikey Devlin, it's not that long ago he was in Scotland squads. Like, it really isn't a long time. So there is obviously a good player there. There's somebody there who's got a huge amount of experience, and I think if Brown continues with his thing of having like a rookie goalkeeper, which seems to be something he really likes, which is unusual, then you need to have a defender in front of him who knows what he's doing and who is going to be sensible enough playing with a rookie goalkeeper to go, right, sometimes I can't give him a back pass, sometimes I need to give him a bollocking, sometimes I need to give him a hug, and just knows that way of dealing with him. And it looks like Devlin maybe is going to be that guy. Like you say though, I don't really understand the goalkeeper situation there. Like, I can't understand how they've ended up in this situation where they've got somebody who, like, he looks okay, but he's somebody who was a youth player last season was he at Queen's Park last season, or was it the season before, or something like that?
Did Queen's Park not send them to somebody like Gart Cairn?
Yeah, I'm sure it was something like that. So you've got somebody who's made this huge jump. You know, if it was a goalkeeper like last season when they had, what was his name, on loan from Celtic? His surname was Clarke, I'm sure. Which means I should probably remember his first name. But they had him on loan from Celtic, a younger player, and you think, okay, he's at Celtic, so he's like Scotland Youth International and all this. He's got this pedigree. I can maybe see what you're trying to do there. But now you've got a guy who was playing the West of Scotland League last season, who was playing youth team football for another team in your league, and all of a sudden he's your number one. I don't know if that was pre-planned, or I don't know if Scott Brown's almost looking at him and going, right, he's the best option we've got at the moment, so he'll do until January, and then we'll go and bring someone else in. I don't know. I can't really work it out, because it's so unusual for a team to go with such an untested goalkeeper in such a competitive league.
It feels like similar but different to discussions we've had about Partick Thistle in the past, for example, where they have 2 or 3 goalkeepers who are maybe okay for the Championship, but none of them are necessarily goalkeepers that you would want to be playing for you if you were looking to get promoted to the Premiership. Kind of feels like that Ayr are in a slightly similar situation. Obviously, they brought in Harry Stone. You kind of felt that he was supposed to be the number one this season. That hasn't quite worked out. You would presume that Brown doesn't fancy him for whatever reason, and he's therefore turned to Russell as his plan B. We'll see how that pans out. I mean, to be fair, he's been fine the last few weeks. He's just not necessarily somebody who you would hang your hat on, I suppose. One positive story to mention, I suppose, is Bavidge, Alfie Bavidge, somebody who's not managed to score so far until Saturday. Got a couple of goals. Listened to his interview. Seems like a good egg. Just seems like a nice, polite young man. It feels like Ayr desperately needs somebody who can score goals. Do you think Bavidge could be that man that could fill the Dowds void?
Yeah, I think he can. Like, I thought he was really, really good at Kelty last year. And when Ayr signed him, I kind of thought, yeah, it can. It's maybe a wee bit higher than I would have expected. I think I maybe thought he would end up at Cove, for example, this year, or someone like that, or maybe Arbroath, something, someone who would be expecting to win League One. Yeah. Actually, could have ended up back at Kelty as a team who would be expected to win League One. But when he went to Ayr, I thought, yeah, okay, like I can see why they've been tempted. I'm not sure how much game time he'll get with Dowds and Oakley, but I'm sure he could.
See the fact that you say that in such a high pitched manner, that means that you don't believe it whatsoever.
No, I'm not fully convinced. But no, but I looked at it and I thought, I can understand why Scott Brown would think, yeah, I'll take a punt on this guy, and I can understand why Alfie Bavidge would go, oh, chance to play Championship football, chance to play under Scott Brown. Yeah, I'll take my opportunity here. Did I expect that he would rattle in 25 goals this season, or maybe 15? No, not at all. Did I expect him to have broken his duck before the middle of December? Yeah, absolutely I did. And I think now we might start to see a change. And it's that thing we've all seen with strikers, where once they get one goal, they can just start to get up and running a wee bit. And I think getting a brace against a team as good as Falkirk should do his confidence the world of good. He can go, you know what, I can do it at this level. And I wouldn't be surprised now to see him maybe go on a wee run if he goes in like 3 goals in his next 5 games or something like that. Because that's kind of how strikers work. And this is like so desperately needed for Ayr at this time. Well, actually, they've been flying without him scoring, to be fair. But so desperately needed.
They're narrowly winning games. They've generally been winning games by like a goal. So they do definitely need somebody who can, because Oakley's a pest. Oakley's a bully. Oakley is a big, strong lummox, but he absolutely isn't a goal scorer. So it still feels like at this run might wither a bit unless he can find somebody to find the back of the net. And January might provide them with an opportunity to find somebody more definitive. But absolutely, Bavidge getting a couple on your right, maybe that just gives him the wee bit of confidence. But it's funny watching somebody. It's like he just come across as like quite a shy, timid wee guy when he was getting interviewed on Saturday. But certainly he came across as quite positive. So maybe he can kick on from here. But I do still think that's something that Ayr United lack.
I wonder what the budget situation will be in terms of getting in a replacement. So they started the season with Dowds and Oakley, and that worked really, really well at the start of the year. Two big, strong guys. They kind of complemented each other quite well because Dowds is more of a goal scorer than Oakley. Certainly at the start of this season was, banging in a decent number of goals. And I wonder if there's the budget there for effectively a fourth striker, a fourth first choice striker, if you would. Or would we see Bavidge potentially going back to Aberdeen and then maybe going out on loan again and they bring in somebody else who will be starting every game? I suppose this is now the time. Like, Alfie Bavidge kind of has 3 weeks or so to go, right, I broke my duck at Ayr United. Now is my time to show that I should be starting every week. And if he doesn't, if he just disappears, he doesn't get another goal and he just kind of slips back into not having a great impact, then his time at Ayr probably would be up in January, you would imagine, if they need to kind of shuffle the books around a wee bit to get in a striker that Brown thinks will be starting every game and ultimately will be capable of firing them to the playoffs. And I suppose, from his point of view, to the Premier League. I mean, if you get to the playoffs, you're not just going to be there to make up the numbers. Like, you've got to go, right, we believe we have enough to get across the line and get into the Premier League, which I don't think they will do. And somebody can quote this back at me in May when they somehow end up in the Premier League and Alfie Bavidge has scored 25 goals, like I said he wouldn't.
I mean, there's quite a difference between each kind of finishing position in the Championship. So you could see why they would kind of push a boat out to bring somebody in, even if it's giving you 10, 15 goals between January and the season, because it feels like nobody else in that team is going to be able to kind of eke that out from their performances. The only other thing I wanted to maybe bring up from the game, I don't know if you've seen John McGuigan's post-game interview, and it's not like I'm not going to try to dig him out about anything that has you. Quite the opposite. I think what you often see, I suppose, in a situation like this when there's been a contentious red card, you'll see a manager kind of mumping and moaning about it, and it was actually quite the opposite. He was saying, right, well, he goes, well, I've heard a couple of things, I'll watch it back, but don't really have an opinion on it right now. But he was perfectly magnanimous about it. So I was quite impressed by how he reacted to that red card, because I think a lot of other managers would have very much used that as an excuse after the game about that, and use it as an excuse because of that 5-2 defeat. But he didn't do that at all. So I thought fair play to him.
If I was a Falkirk fan as well, I'd be really reassured by that, because that looks to me like a man who is hugely confident in his team. He just goes, yeah, you know what, whatever happened, but we'll be back next week, we'll get 3 points and everyone will forget about it. That's what it feels like to me. And I think if you're a player in that dressing room, it'd be very easy to get wound up or to be like, oh, well, they battered us because we got this incorrect decision and it's all unfair and everyone's against us. But if he's not pushing that sort of narrative, then it keeps everyone calm. And like, Falkirk are the best footballing side in the division, quite possibly the best side in the division. And that's the sort of attitude you would expect of a manager who has a great deal of confidence in his players, that it's just, you know what, that's 3 points lost. Doesn't matter. We'll go again next week. And they've got a good run coming up as well, like you would expect them. So they've got Hamilton, Dunfermline, Airdrie, Queen's Park as their next 4 games. They could win all 4, and that wouldn't be a massive surprise. So I think that's reassuring. And it's good for McGuigan as well, because like you say, it would be very easy for him to just, he knows the fans are furious, he knows the players are furious, he will know the decision was a bit weird. He probably didn't have a clue what it was given for, if we don't know after watching it back so many times, to be fair. And he didn't want to say anything in case it was obvious. But it would be so easy for him to kind of just take wee veiled digs at the ref or whatever, and to not do that. Yeah, I think that's reassuring.
Yeah, I thought it was quite interesting, quite refreshing actually. So in terms of, we've discussed Ayr, we've discussed Falkirk. In terms of, it now looks like there is I suppose a title fight in the Championship. Livingston won on Friday evening against Partick Thistle, won again against Airdrie on Tuesday evening by 3-0. Closed the gap to 2 points at the top of the Championship, to 2 points by Falkirk. What have you made of Livingston this season? Because I think Falkirk have had so many plaudits, and rightly so, absolutely rightly so. However, you have a Livingston side that are just 2 points behind them, so surely they deserve as many plaudits.
I actually didn't realise how good Livingston have been until I went and looked at them. Like, went and looked at their form. because it feels like nobody's talking about them. There's been so much hype around Falkirk, and rightly so. Like, they're brilliant to watch. They've been scoring goals. They've been on that incredible run last season where they went unbeaten. Livingston have lost once in their last 20 games. That's incredible, and I think it will suit them down to the ground, just cruising beneath everyone's attention span for realising how good they are. Now I've outed it so everyone can now notice and they can go on a dodgy run. But when I looked at that, coupled with them just brushing aside Airdrie 3-0, I imagine without breaking too much of a sweat, the night before we recorded, the night we recorded this podcast.
You're too busy watching snooker.
yeah. See, I've got no idea what's going on. I looked at that, coupled with their form, and I thought, Livingston are probably going to win this league. They're going to do it in a sort of undramatic, unexciting, solid, dependent way, almost maybe a wee bit like Dundee United did last year, where Raith weren't like Falkirk in terms of smashing teams, but I think everyone got quite into the whole Raith Rovers idea. Like, certainly me as an outsider looked at it and was like, I could really go Raith going up, like these last minute goals and the kind of drama and the excitement. But deep down I knew Dundee United were probably always just going to win it, and it was a bit boring. And I feel like, I'm not saying Livingston are boring, I'm just saying I feel like deep down they might just end up having enough about them to grind out results and to get over the line, because they won't drop as many silly points. Whereas Falkirk, you've got a team who are brilliant to watch. What happens if they have an off day? What happens if something like this happens and they get, gubbed by Ayr on an off day? I just feel like Livingston aren't exciting enough to have a spectacular 5-2 defeat off day.
No, you're right. I think up until Friday when they beat Partick Thistle, I was wondering about them in terms of, how like Falkirk can just put teams to the sword. Like, I know we've discussed Falkirk losing 5-2, but most other weeks, see, when it comes to like a Falkirk victory, it's about, they've won 5-0, or they've won 3-0, or they've won convincingly. Livingston very rarely do that, or have very rarely done that. I thought they did do that against Partick Thistle. And yes, I don't think this is a great Partick Thistle team, and Partick Thistle have struggled against Falkirk as well this season. But I thought the way they handled Partick Thistle's challenge on Friday was very impressive. I've watched the highlights from the Airdrie game on Tuesday, and Airdrie had like a decent spell in the first half, but regardless, Livingston had far too much for them. And now, maybe, see in terms of how Tete Yenge, who I think might have been regarded as the central striker at the start of the season, he's now playing out wide. Stevie May on the other side, maybe Robbie Muirhead, for example, on the other side. It just feels like that's starting to click a wee bit more. And in terms of like defensively, I think in terms of Ryan McGuigan at the back, for example, in terms of the keeper, Jerome Pryor, I think he's a decent keeper. I think Scott Pittman in front of them. So they've got a decent spine. Defensively, they're sound. And I think maybe just now, in terms of going forward, they're starting to click a wee bit more than they were maybe August, September, October, for example. So and maybe as much as I tipped Livingston at the start of the season, I was starting to not necessarily believe it. But maybe now there's a wee bit about them. And certainly, obviously, you've seen it against the two games against Falkirk. Like, they weren't great by any stretch of the imagination, but they've taken 4 points out of a possible 6 against Falkirk. So there's definitely feels like there's a title race. And you're right, I think I do think they aren't going to be the most exciting team in the championship. But they're very, very consistent. They've lost one game this season. So I tipped them at the start of the season, so I will stay with them, but I don't think they would be the most exciting one of the championship. What would be very funny is Livingston. I got the impression that a lot of supporters from the Premiership enjoyed the fact that Livingston got relegated. It'd be very funny to see them go automatically back up. It's like, geez, we need to go back to Livingston. We need to play on that plastic pitch again. Here we are again. That would be funny.
It would be very, very funny to have them back in the Premier League after how hated they seem to be up there. Oh, they've only got 1,000 fans and they've got a plastic pitch. And it's just really funny that it irritates them. But I think that front three is really interesting. Like, 3 really interesting players between Tete Yenge, Stevie May and Robbie Muirhead, who fascinates me. Like, I love watching Robbie Muirhead. He's so big. He's just so huge. And like, you never quite know what you're going to get. So you had his red card last season where he basically just had a complete tantrum on the pitch and got sent off for having a tantrum, which was very, very funny. But by the same token, like, he scores some of the best goals that you will see in a season. And I think this season, he has really screwed the head at Livingston. He is, don't know if it's, I was going to say embracing the opportunity of being back at a bigger club. Don't know how much bigger Livingston are than Morton, but I suppose with that recent Premiership history, he's probably looking at it and going, I can get back to playing in the Premier League here.
Yeah.
Like, I can get back to the top flight, and that's where I think he believes that he should be. And if you'd said that a couple of seasons ago, that Robbie Muirhead would be an important player in a team getting back into the Premier League, I think people would have laughed. Like, he had a dreadful run at Morton before he started to click and actually became quite an effective player for them. I think he's on quite an interesting story, quite an interesting sort of redemption arc in his career now, potentially, Robbie Muirhead. The interesting thing is going to be, and from reading through their thread on Pine Bovril this morning, is if Stevie May stays. So there was a little bit of talk about Simo Valakari maybe wanting him back at St Johnstone. They don't have a great depth on their bench when it comes to forward players. And would you look at May and think, he's really experienced, he's been good for Livingston? He's maybe not the player he was who scored, well, he's not the player he was prior to the injury where he was a really, really prolific goal scorer, but he's clever, he's hardworking, he's obviously St Johnstone daft, so you know he would give everything. And if they're in a relegation fight, like, can you really afford to have Stevie May in the season in the league below when he's your player? Or would you be better getting him back just in case he can add something in the Premier League? And I don't think I think he's Championship is probably his level now.
Yeah.
But if you're a St Johnstone manager and you're looking at him going, would I rather have him as an option? Would I rather turn round with 15 minutes to go, we need a goal, and see him there, or not see him there? You'd maybe rather he was there. So that's going to be interesting to see if he can stick around.
See, my understanding of St Johnstone is actually, as much as they're rubbish, they've got some decent forwards. So whether like, you're right, May might be fourth or fifth choice or whatever. And maybe if the choice was put to him, but clearly he's leading the line for Livingston, has an opportunity to play every week, play 90 minutes every week, or play 75 minutes every week, and potentially win the league or get promoted, and presumably win a deal at Livingston, whether they're in the Championship or in the Premiership next season, because I'm fairly certain his deal is up at the end of this season with St Johnstone. So maybe it comes down to what May wants to do as well. But you're right, quite an interesting point in terms of how Livy progress from Livingston onwards, from January onwards. Sorry. Now I was going to talk about the Fife derby, but you know something, like, who cares? It was just two terrible teams, kind of battling it out. Just a really poor game. First half especially, like a really poor game. I was relieved, more than delighted at full time, that Raith were able to pull off a 2-0 win. An interesting start to the week as well. And I do want to mention this in terms of, you mentioned Pine Bovril. There was somebody who essentially suggested that they were a family member to Sam Stanton on Pine Bovril on Monday. We weren't on there for long, only posted two or three posts and then disappeared. Now, I don't think anybody who is a family member of a player who may be getting a hard time on Pine Bovril, I don't think that's ever a good way to go about things. I don't think it ever necessarily makes things better. But I suppose what I did think was interesting, and I don't think you necessarily have the answer or suggestions about how you improve this, but I did think it was quite interesting in terms of the suggestion about Sam Stanton this season. Like, there was a rumour that he'd handed in a transfer request. He's barely been seen this season. It's not like Lewis Vaughan, who went off with an injury, and it was like, right, Lewis Vaughan's injured, he'll be back in February. It's always things like, oh, Sam Stanton's got a niggle. It's always things like that. And the suggestion was, well, maybe you shouldn't be talking about players in that manner. Maybe you shouldn't be, I don't know, kind of, if you don't know the facts, then maybe you shouldn't be discussing it. But then at the same time, it's like, well, it's a football forum, and he's a player that everybody loves at Raith Rovers. Everybody misses. We don't really know why he's not playing every week, so you can understand why there was a discussion about it. But at the same time, I think the person who suggested they were a family member was saying Sam Stanton has feelings and he's a model professional and he would never make up reasons not to play for Raith. And that's absolutely fine, but it did make me think about, well, what if that's unacceptable in terms of discussing them online, then like where did you draw the line? I'm not saying you have an answer, but I just thought it was an interesting discussion.
Yeah, I think it's, what's that thing, avoid causes speculation or whatever it is. It's like one of these rules that they talk to you about where it's, if you don't say anything, people are going to speculate, and probably what they'll speculate is worse than the truth.
Yeah.
So even if, you know, we obviously don't know what's going on there, but if something had came up in his personal life and he was like, look, I need to step away from football for 3 months for whatever reason, they just said, due to, you know, personal issues, Sam Stanton won't be involved until later notice or something like that. People might speculate a wee bit, but I think they would by and large probably like respect that privacy, especially when he's been such a good player. And when he's not a player, like I can't imagine Sam Stanton getting into any trouble. So if there'd been another player and you'd be like, whoa, personal issues, he's like going to be in a jail cell or something like that, you're expecting to see him on the front page of the Sun. Yeah, you're expecting to see him like involved in some sort of heinous crime or something. That's not Sam Stanton. And I think people would just step away from it. But there's always going to be speculation, particularly when it's a player people care about, and a player who is important. So would this Rovers team be improved by a fully fit, fully firing Sam Stanton? Yeah, of course it would. Every team in the Championship would be improved by that. So you're looking at one of your best players not featuring. People are going to say, it's going to be talk of it. People are going to be saying, why is Stanton not featuring? Oh, he's got a niggle. Has he not had a niggle for the past 4 months? Yes, that's not a niggle. That's a wee bit more than that. That's like a proper injury. It's a bad injury. So I suppose only ultimately people very closely connected to the club are going to know the situation there. But I don't think you can do anything to stop speculation other than put something out to try and end it. That's the only thing you can do. And if they're not willing to do that, or if it is, maybe it's true. Maybe he has literally just been unlucky. Every time he's nearing match fitness, something pings, something gets tight again. And he goes, no, I can't. I'm like, that's me out for another couple of weeks. But then maybe you'd want Neil Collins out, or you'd want Sam Stanton out saying, look, you've had injury setback after injury setback and I'm really frustrated, but you know, I'm fully committed to Raith for the rest of the season, or something like that, just to kind of put an end to it. Although, I don't know, talking myself up in knots here, because the other part of me is going, well, why should he have to justify it?
No, but that's just that I don't think for a minute that Raith Rovers need to kind of justify anything. I'm not necessarily saying that the club, in terms of the communication, is not good enough. I don't think they have to tell Raith Rovers fans like every kind of spit and whistle that's going on behind the scenes. But I just thought it was an interesting conversation in terms of somebody saying, listen, Sam Stanton's got feelings, people are kind of making up stories about him or kind of speculating, and that has an impact on players. And I thought, well, you know, something that's quite interesting in terms of, I suppose, where do you draw the line? But you're right, so nobody's talking about Vaughan because we know he's out until February, but nobody knows anything about Sam Stanton. It's just it's a curious case. But the person who seemed to be Sam Stanton's family member has now disappeared from Pine Bovril. Their flame burned brightly but quickly.
I've had 2 players over the past, what would it be, 9 years now. 2 players have messaged me like privately and asked me to clarify things that they've read on Pine Bovril. So they do read it, and both times it's been speculation about why he left the club and one about if he would be leaving the club. And both have messaged me privately on Twitter and said, I know you post on Pine Bovril, can you go on there and clarify that this is happening? Just say it came from someone else. One of the players said to say it came from the woman at the Morrison's fish counter, and that's a kind of on-running joke in Pine Bovril, so that suggests that he is a regular visitor to our thread.
So, funnily enough, talking about Dumbarton, let's drop into League One. Dumbarton versus Annan Athletic. Dumbarton 1, Annan Athletic 5. My goodness, where do we start? Well, listen, Anna went 1-0 up after 34 minutes, a goal through Paul Smith. It was soon 2-0 in 38 minutes thanks to Willie Gibson. However, a goal just before half-time from Mohamed Yang made it 2-1 and presumably gave Fraser some hope that they could swing the game back in their favour in the second half. However, shortly after half-time, Rhys Breen made it 3-1. Then after 66 minutes, Aidan Smith made it 4-1. And then scoring was wrapped up by Tommy Muir in the 76th minute to make it 5-1 to Annan. Fraser, what on earth is going on with Dumbarton? Because I think the last time I'd done a podcast, I spoke to Fowler and I said that the kind of reactions from the Dumbarton players when they beat Alloa 3-2 in the Scottish Cup, it just felt like there was an extra reaction. I don't know how to describe it. And that very much gave me a sense that they were all in it together. And there was a certain sense of impetus and that maybe they could kick on from this position. I think since then they've maybe drawn with Alloa in the league 2-2 and then lost 4-0, albeit I appreciate there was certain circumstances, 2 red cards against Sennismuir, one of which has been rescinded. But this, yes, I know there was injuries. This looked dreadful.
Yeah, I think this... I mean, ultimately, Stevie Farrell, to be fair, said he didn't want to blame the injuries because he signed a squad of players and the players he put out ultimately weren't good enough. And that's true. But you look at the players Dumbarton had out for this game. So there was no Brett Long, so that's your first choice goalkeeper out. There was no Mark Durnan, that's your first choice centre-back and your captain out. There was no Carlo Pinatiello, who's probably our second best player. There was no Jinky Hilton, who's our top scorer, and no Michael Ruth, who is our best player. And you go, of all the players to lose, how on earth did we manage to lose all of our best players pretty much in one go? Like, it's just an astonishing lack of luck. And from what Faz was saying, looks like Hilton and Ruth are going to be out longer term.
All right, okay.
That's a massive blow because this is a Dumbarton team who haven't kept a clean sheet all season, but have been fairly competitive on the basis that they score goals. So I think Ruth's got 6 and Hilton's got 7, I think, to their names this season. You take out the 2 of them, and it's going to be a Dumbarton team that doesn't keep clean sheets and now doesn't score goals. And it's been very, very evident in the 2 games that Ruth has missed how important he is defensively to the team.
Yeah.
So everyone knows how good Michael Ruth is as a striker because I go on about it all the time and because Telfer goes on about it all the time. See, without him holding the ball up, we look a million times worse defensively because the ball just does not stick. So we have been trying to play Joel Mbongo in the same way. He can't play with his back to goal. Like, I've never seen a striker look so uncomfortable with his back to goal. Play a ball over the top for him to get in behind, that's fine. But he's one of these players who wants as few touches as possible. Like, he realistically wants to be played through on goal and have one touch, and that is to put the ball in the net, which he hasn't yet managed to do for us either. But Ruth is somebody who, you give him the ball, he'll hold on to it, he'll maybe drag a defender out of position, he'll win a throw in, he'll win a corner, he'll win a foul, he'll just take the pressure off and let the team push up the park a wee bit. Without him, we're really, really, really in a difficult situation. And the natural successor, the natural replacement if Ruth is out, another guy who can hold the ball up in that way is Hilton. But he's out as well. So now you've got 2 strikers who play a broadly similar way. I mean, Ruth is a much better all-round forward than Hilton, but Hilton's pretty effective up there because his touch is so good and because he can hold the ball up. You've got both of them out. So then the team's having to play in a completely different way, and it's having to do it in Saturday without our first choice goalkeeper, with a guy in Paddy O'Neill, who's a great guy. Like, I cannot speak highly enough about Paddy as a guy, but he is 32 years old and has played around about 40 games in senior football. Like, he's a number 2. He has been a number 2 his whole career.
In fairness, I didn't think, was he at fault for any of the 5 in his defence?
The third one, I felt he should have pushed it to a better area. It was a header by Tommy Muir.
Okay, I'll give you that. Yep.
Pushes it. And even the first one, maybe to a degree, it's a really good flick by Josh Dixon, like a sort of, what would you call it? Like a scorpion kick.
It was like a back heel, wasn't it?
Yeah, like a running back heel
volley
scorpion kick sort of thing, like Olivier Giroud did for Arsenal a few years ago. And again, Paddy kind of saves it, but doesn't push it out to a great area, doesn't get great distance on it, and it falls to Paul Smith to put it home. So Brett Long's not been in fantastic form this season. Would we have conceded those? I don't know if we would have conceded those if he had been in goals. It's difficult to say. He was obviously left exposed by Durnan not being there. Then we lost Mikey Miller after 9 minutes of this game, so it's another experienced player. So effectively we had Matty Shields, who is a wing back, and Ethan Brown, who is an 18-year-old centre half, as the 2 central defenders in this game. Then Aaron Linus at right back, who hasn't played a great deal, and I think maybe the feeling is that, like, League 2 is Aaron's level. He's fine if you need to chuck him on for 10-15 minutes to just defend for our lives, but maybe this is just a bit of a stretch to be playing in League 1. And then Cammy Clarke at left back, who I like, but I'm not entirely sure why.
Okay, that's very much a backhanded compliment. So with all that in mind, because I think Annan played decent football or have played decent football in spells this season, but don't necessarily have. They kind of fail in the opponent's box and then struggle in their own penalty area. So is this? I'm starting to kind of guess where you're maybe going with this. Was this a good performance from Annan that maybe lead you to believe they could stay up this season, or was it just a very poor performance from Dumbarton?
I thought defensively Annan looked atrocious, but offensively they looked really, really good. And I want to talk about Tommy Muir, because Tommy Muir obviously been one of these guys who is a centre-half one season and then a striker the next season. So he's wearing number 5. He was playing up front and he played a part in 4 out of the 5 goals, and he was absolutely superb.
It just looked like he was having a laugh.
He looked like, you know, if you get somebody along to 5s who's maybe played at half decent level, like they played juniors or something, and they're just miles better than everyone else, and they just kind of saunter about and they can do a bit of everything. That's what Tommy Muir looked like. He absolutely bullied us. I was glad he got a goal. I wasn't glad he got a goal, obviously, because it was against my team. But nobody on the pitch deserved a goal more than him. And I was really, really pleased for him when he scored the 5th goal in a good style, because I thought, yeah, you know what? Like, you've ran us ragged. You've been so unselfish, playing a part, like winning the penalty. Clever bit of play to win the penalty. It's a Stonewall. I think we had some fans complaining about it. It's a Stonewall penalty. He's just smart in winning it. Wins the penalty. He then plays the ball through to Aidan Smith for the 4th goal. Just a really, really nice move from Annan. Like that, they played some brilliant football going forward, considering the state of the pitch, which we will come on to as well. He wins the header for Rhys Breen's goal that is kind of pushed out by O'Neill, and Breen stabs it in and then scores a really, really good goal himself. So I thought going forward, Annan, like they looked the part, and they looked a lot smarter than us. They knew how to hold the ball up. They knew when to play quickly. They knew when to play slowly. They knew when to slow the game down. They knew when they needed to kind of speed it up and think, right, there's going to be a gap there. We can play around them. So I was really impressed by them going forward. I do think a better team, or a Dumbarton side with Ruth and Hilton in it, probably would have scored 3 or 4 goals in the first half.
Willie Gibson was, I mean, he was enthused, but not overly enthused, but probably that's because he was interviewed in pitch blackness by the Annan media team. Just you could barely see his face. All very unusual. So you alluded to the fact that Dumbarton's pitch isn't very good. What on earth happened? Because it wasn't like this the last time I seen it.
Looks like somebody's driven a tractor on it.
Yes, but how? What's happened?
So I'm assuming, because we have history for this, I'm assuming that the pitches needed verti-drained, which our previous groundsman had said, yeah, it'll help the pitch, but you can't do it when it's wet. But the current groundsman has just gone, well, it needs verti-drain, so we'll just do it now. Now, I've cut my back garden struggles with drainage, much like Dumbarton Football Club's pitch, and I can't really cut the grass on it when the grass is wet, or else it ends up looking like Dumbarton's pitch. I assume he's just gone for it and thought, oh, well, it needs verti-drain. We're booked in to come on Wednesday, so we'll just do it, because it had genuinely up both wings tyre tracks. It looked like somebody had been on it on a quad.
Yeah, it was extraordinary. See the footage from the highlights. So I still think it's very unusual that you've come out to Fucking in the Bushes by Oasis. I think that's a weird song to come out to, but regardless. So you come out to that song, you have a plinth. I don't know why. I think it's weird that any lower league football club has a plinth, but regardless, again, so you've got Fucking in the Bushes, you've got a plinth that the referee takes the ball off, and then you're like, right, this is a big game, this was really important. And then the camera is panned round, and it looks like a field in Belgium in 1915. I was like, what on earth is happening here? Because it wasn't like this, you're right, it wasn't like this the last time I seen it, which must have been, whatever, a week or 2 ago.
Yeah, and I drove, so the way I drive to games, I drive through Dumbarton Common. So you've got Dumbarton Aki's pitch on one side, and you've got basically like the council community pitches on the other side. They look much better. Like, they look like Wembley compared to our pitch. So I drove through there and thought, actually, I didn't think. I had no thoughts at all about the pitch, because I just thought, well, it didn't pop into my mind. Parked my car, looked at my phone, and you'd sent me the tweet from Annan with the pitch. And I looked at it and I was just like, oh my goodness, is somebody broken in? like youth clubs quite often have their pitches vandalised by like yobs on on motocross bikes. It was like that, but with a tractor. I just looked at it in kind of disbelief, and then I thought maybe it's like maybe Annan have taken it at that perspective to kind of a wee bit of trolling, and maybe it's not as bad as it looks. Maybe that's like over on the touchline beyond the line. No, it's probably actually looks worse than that.
Yeah, it's as bad as it's ever been. I was actually thinking to myself a few weeks ago that the pitch was really, at the Dumbarton was really holding up well, and fair play to everybody involved. And actually, it's as bad as it's ever been. I take it. I mean, I could be wrong. I take it this game was a defining moment in terms of where Dumbarton finish in the table. I mean, if you'd won this, you wouldn't have been entirely surprised if they could claw back the deficit to Annan, but surely now you're thinking 10th.
Yeah. I don't see any reason. I don't see any way in which we can avoid it unless somebody goes into administration and we can put together a run.
With somebody else. Yeah. you don't. Yeah. There's not enough teams in that league in administration right now.
And by somebody, I mean probably Annan, because anyone else, we wouldn't really catch them. So unless
Inverness would have to go into administration twice.
Unless Annan collapse or Inverness just go out of business, I can't see any way that we avoid finishing 10th. Especially, and probably more so, or maybe kind of factored in with the result. You've got the result, right, that's a body blow. And then you get told Michael Ruth and James Hilton are out long term. And you think, okay, we've now lost our two most potent attacking threats, and we've just been beaten 5-1 by the team that we thought we were better than. And yeah, that's... You don't want to say there's no chance, but I think we are looking at a miracle. The only thing I can think of as well is maybe a global pandemic, but this time they don't relegate a team.
Listen, you've done very well in terms of the Kickstarter. So at least the future of Dumbarton might be in safe hands. However, I do think that next season it might be in League Two. I mean, I'm laughing at that. It's no funny, but that pitch, my goodness. Now we were going to discuss Forfar's 5-1 win over Bonnyrigg. However, it turned out that they were playing Peterhead on Tuesday evening. So it probably did give us a good opportunity to talk about the turnaround in Forfar's fortunes, and probably no player more so than Russell McLean. Somebody who has now scored 6 goals in or 2 successive games, 2 successive hat-tricks, 3 against Stirling Albion in the Scottish Cup that myself and Fowler discussed, and another hat-trick against Bonnyrigg in that 5-1 win. And I think he also had an assist in the goal that Nathan Cannon scored in the equaliser against Peterhead. An extraordinary turnaround. And I don't know if you saw the interview that he gave on Saturday. It came across really well, but I mean, it was only a very quick interview. But he was talking about the fact that he said, I don't know if you know, but basically it had already been agreed that I was getting sold. So presumably under Ray McKinnon, he was very much out the door in January. But to be fair, I was thinking about this because he also said in an interview about the fact that he goes, I mean, if you're a fan that comes every week, you know about the fact that I just don't run. And it was like it seemed like quite an unusual admittance, I suppose, that he doesn't run. But Jim Weir, again, mentioned that a couple of weeks ago. He says that Russell McLean is a player that if you build a system around him, then he is essentially invaluable after that hat-trick against Stirling Albion. But yeah, that hat-trick against Bonnyrigg, admittedly not helped, I think, by the goalkeeping from Craig Hepburn in the Bonnyrigg goal. But regardless, 6 goals in 2 games when you'd only scored 2 all season before that, and even Josh Skelly managing to score, somebody who, my goodness, I can't remember the last time he scored. It says a lot about how, I don't know, how the players performed under Ray McKinnon and how he set them up compared to what Jim Weir is getting out of them and how he's got them set up.
I find Russell McLean one of the most confusing players in the country. So he scored a lot of goals against us. And when we signed him, I was absolutely delighted because I thought this guy, particularly at Montrose, like he really, really looked the part against us. I thought he's exactly what we've been needing in this team. And he was rubbish. Like, to be fair, Forfar fans, Peterhead fans and Montrose fans were like, he's got a decent record for us, but we don't really rate him. And I thought, but he always looks really good against us. How can you not rate him? Like, he's you've got higher standards than us when it comes to strikers. Like we've not really had a good striker in years. Russell McLean will be great for us. I stood for a couple of games actually with John Gemmell on commentary and watched Russell McLean, and he was not a fan. Some of the things that some of the faces that he pulled at me whilst he put his microphone down when McLean like stooped out of heading for the ball, or just didn't want to challenge for a high ball, or just or he looked like a man who was having a horrible time when he played for us most of the time.
But is that not because he's tall, but he's not somebody that wants the ball delivered to his head. He wants the ball played into his feet.
And he makes it very apparent he doesn't want the ball delivered to his head when he just doesn't bother his arse jumping for it or moving for it or anything like that. But when I interviewed him, I'd obviously heard from Peterhead fans and from Montrose fans being like, oh, he's a bit of a divisive character and he's maybe got a bit of an ego or whatever. And I interviewed him just after he signed for us and thought, what a great guy. Like I really took him, really liked him. Not at all what I expected him to be like. I thought he'd be a bit arrogant or a bit kind of aloof, or I don't know, just didn't expect him to be like he was. And that came flooding back watching that interview. But he's such an enigma. And there's something he says, and I wrote it down as well. As any of the boys will tell you, I'm confident in myself all the time, but I need someone to show trust in me. Those are contradictory positions, I feel. Like, if you feel, I'm really confident, I can do this, I know I'm good enough, you shouldn't need somebody to be like, you're a great player, Russell. Like, we really trust you. We've built our system around you. So I don't know if he knows the best way to get the best out of himself. I'm not sure anyone does. But with Russell McLean that there's always the prospect of something like this happening. Like, if Montrose, we probably saw the best of Montrose, I would say. If Montrose and Stuart Petrie couldn't get a consistent, regular tune out of him, probably nobody can. But when he's in this sort of form, I sat and watched those highlights, and then I watched his goals back again this morning, and just thought, I wish you'd been a success at Dumbarton. I really, if we were to sign you tomorrow again, I'd be into it. I'd be like, yeah, Russell McLean, he was great against us from Montrose. And then I'd get taken into this same situation where I just, the idea of him is better than the reality or whatever. But I find him so confusing. And the fact that he's scored hat-tricks in back-to-back games after scoring, twice all season, doesn't surprise me. That's what I can say. And that's the most Russell McLean thing possible. It's just not a surprise that he scored 6 goals in 2 games, having scored twice in the previous 20.
I loved it. I think it was Josh Skelly that kind of went down on one knee, and then Rusty put his foot up, and he just started polishing his boot. I don't know if you saw that. I don't know if you saw the highlights against Peterhead. 2 things to point out. A, McLean's header for the assist for Cannon's equaliser against Peterhead. Did you see why Andy McCarthy got sent off for Peterhead?
That's the only bit I've seen in that game. So funny.
Absolutely tremendous. So, long story short, Peterhead had just scored. Andy McCarthy then runs onto the ball as it kind of, I don't know, bounces around the 6-yard box and then just scalps it off Mark McCallum. Do you think he meant it?
So I've watched it back a couple of times, and it looks like McCarthy almost kind of puts his hands up like, oh shit, what have I done?
So I think he thinks it's an accident. The only thing that makes me think it maybe wasn't an accident is I think that most football players think that Mark McCallum's an arsehole.
And see, the thing is, if you're talking about a player who isn't that kind of player, Andy McCarthy definitely is that kind of player.
He meant it.
Sneaky, snide, knows what he's up to. I think he's a cracking player, but if you said, as soon as I read Andy McCarthy sent off for booting the ball at Mark McCallum, I wasn't surprised at all, because I can see him doing that, and I can see McCallum has wound him up and probably brought it on himself to some degree. But I do wonder if he maybe meant to scalp it over him and into the fans and just give him a wee fright, or just get a get it up you sort of thing, and accidentally he's just bulleted it right off him.
Yeah, I get the impression that wasn't exactly what he planned, but very funny. Regardless, a very funny red card. So, in terms of who Forfar play on Saturday, Forfar seem reinvigorated under Jim Meir. They're still bottom of the league. They've got a massive game on Saturday against Clyde, a team who I actually thought were going to kick on under Darren Young. However, they appear to have financial woes, which maybe have impacted on their form. I'm not entirely sure, but certainly they've lost their last couple of games. Lost again in midweek against Elgin. We're 3-0 down at half-time, managed to turn it around to 3-2, but ultimately lost 4-2. They have, I think it was last week or the week before, last week, they suggested that they were going to start a Kickstarter because, so let me get this right, and you might need to correct me here. As far as I'm aware, they were initially £180,000 short in terms of their budget this season. However, somebody has filled the majority of the gap, and I think the Kickstarter is now at about 40,000, which I believe is pretty much more or less what they needed to continue for the rest of the season. But I suppose the question would be, considering Clyde are a kind of supporter-run club, how on earth do they find themselves in this situation?
It seems like it's been, or they've ended up as victims of their own optimism. So I think their budget for the season was based on average crowds of 800. Now,
they're not a million, you know something, they're not a million miles away for that. Like, I think they're sitting at about 650, but I appreciate 150 at whatever it is, £18 a week. I appreciate that I suppose is a big difference. But it's not as if they're the worst supported club in League Two, I suppose.
No, they are probably, I know the Bonnierig thread is the best supported club in League Two. Clyde
they absolutely aren't.
Yeah, Clyde probably are the best supported club in League Two. Like, if Clyde are pushing for the championship, they would, in terms of like winning the league, not the actual championship, you would imagine they would get around about 1,000 through their gates, and you wouldn't bat an eyelid towards that. But when they are scrapping away at the wrong end of League Two, playing in Hamilton, because I think one of the big problems is what is Clyde Football Club at the moment? Like, they're a club from Glasgow who have played in Lanarkshire and are now back playing on the other side of Lanarkshire. So your people who are Clyde fans, it's not like people who move to Hamilton just start supporting Clyde, or people who have grown up in Cumbernauld, maybe went to Clyde games, maybe weren't massive Clyde fans, but maybe went along because the games were local. Now they've moved to Hamilton. Are they travelling to South Lanarkshire to watch them? Probably not. So they're in this weird situation. But if Clyde were as successful as I certainly thought they were going to be this season, with Ian McCollum, with the squad that they assembled, I can see them getting crowds comfortably over 800 most weeks. I suppose where the gamble was, and it's not something I expected to go as badly wrong as it is you're spending this money, you're going, right, we've got this squad that is more than capable of being right up at the top end of League Two. That'll get the big numbers coming through, and we'll be absolutely fine financially. The players have underperformed massively, like hugely. And I still look at that Clyde squad and I think, how are you so bad?
Yeah.
Like, I can't understand. Even Jordan Allen on his own. Jordan Allen would probably get in most League One teams. I know that Steny were looking at him in the summer, for example. I think he would have been a really good signing for a club like Steny. He probably would get in the Alloa team, a team right up at the top of League One. It's not really happening for him. Every single player seems to be underperforming. Like when they brought in Andy Murdoch, and I thought, somebody Ian McCall knows inside out, someone who's been a really good player in the Championship. Yeah, he's had injury problems, but dropping down to League Two, he'll cruise that league. No, it's not really had any great impression there. So right throughout the team, they're probably being paid very handsomely and they're underperforming hugely. And it feels like, I thought last season actually Ian McCall got a bit of praise that was maybe unwarranted, because he took over Clyde at around about the similar time that Alan Hale took over at Elgin.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Alan Hale kept Elgin up and did it without really splashing the cash. Now this summer I think they maybe have splashed a wee bit more money and they're flying up at the top end of the league. With the players that Clyde brought in the end of January, I thought Clyde should be pushing towards 6th, 5th in the table. And they didn't stay up. I don't think they stayed up officially till the last day or the penultimate day of the season in the end. So I thought something didn't feel right with McCall. Wasn't surprised when he got punted. Wasn't surprised that they had a slow start to the season. Wasn't surprised when he got punted. But then you see Darren Young coming in and you think, this guy, if you're in League Two and you want to get promoted out of League Two, Darren Young's your man. He's your go-to guy. It is obviously going to take him time, but I thought he would get a tune out of this team a lot quicker than he has done. And them getting beaten 4-2 by Elgin last night, being 3-0 down at half-time in that game, looked like a massive warning sign to me, because you think Forfar are finding a bit of form. Stranraer picked up a really good result against Spartans that I didn't see coming, because Stranraer were the other team that I've maybe started to earmark as being in danger again. Picked up a really good result against Spartans. Clyde get beaten against Spartans, and then okay, it was 4-2 in the end, but they're 3-0 down at halftime to Elgin, like getting beaten quite comprehensively. It doesn't look good. And then off the park, things don't look great either, because fundamentally, at the moment, Clyde Football Club are a badge and not a lot more than that, because they don't have a base, they don't have a home ground, they're clearly struggling financially. They're like a badge, a name, and a fan base, and not an awful lot more than that, and that's got to be a worry.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think we kind of touched on this at the time in terms of Clyde leaving Cumbernauld, moving into Hamilton. Okay, fine, very much a temporary measure, but where are they going to settle down roots? So I can't even remember the name of the area of Glasgow where there was a suggestion that they could do that. I think some people said at the time that was never going to happen. I think that's already been rejected. Feels like they need to set down roots before they can really grow. But I suppose the problem is, how on earth do they do that if signing players with the greatest will in the world of the ability of Jordan Allen and Marley Redfern means that they're £200,000 over budget? Because if you're needing fans to dig your club out of a hole because you're overspending on wages in League Two, I don't really see how you ever build a stadium or rent a stadium that is your own, or become like the main renters of a stadium anywhere. And that ultimately is key to Clyde's survival, because I suppose what the concern is, other than that wee spell where Daniel Lennon led them out of the fourth tier into the third tier, and it feels like they're starting to become one of those teams that just circle the drain. And what happens, that ultimately you become Club 42 and you end up in the playoffs, whether it's once, whether it's twice. And you're right, I still think that squad should be doing better than they are. But even if Darren Young was to move players on in January, considering how much they're struggling with wages, presumably he's going to have to bring in guys on very, very little money to replace them. And sometimes effort can kind of top trump quality. I get that. Maybe moving on a couple of players who have disappointed in terms of maybe having I've come from a better level than League Two, I suppose, and I've underperformed. I don't know. Maybe they will be trumped by a couple of guys from League Two or the lower league who will give more of an effort. I don't know, but I think it will be a real struggle for Darren Young, based on how much money he has to play with. And bear in mind, a lot of these players are presumably on very good wages for League Two and on like long deals. Like, there'll be a lot of players that don't really want to give that up, and rightly so.
That's the big factor, is if these players are underperforming and they're on good money, who's going to come in for them? So Allen's a slightly different one. He's obviously on loan, so that's potentially fine. Like, you might be able to punt him back. I'm not saying that they should, just that might be an option if they're struggling financially. But for the other guys who are there permanently, they're not going to walk away from a deal that's maybe a 2-year deal on very, very good money just because they're underperforming. And if somebody comes in and goes, oh, we'd like to speak to you, we'll offer you 40% of what you're on and a deal until next summer. No, you just sit it out, wouldn't you? I mean, there'd be absolutely no reason to walk away from that. And I also wonder how much damage this has done to them going forward. So it felt like this was Clyde's chance. They'd thrown everything at it to win the league or win promotion this season. It's like promotion or bust. If they're not going to win the league this season, they're probably not going to get promoted this season. It would take a massive turnaround for that to happen. So then they've got another season in League Two, another season potentially with dwindling crowds, another season with a hugely expensive playing squad. What's the end game here? Because presumably their squad next year is certainly going to be cheaper. I was going to say it's going to be worse. That's no indication it's going to be worse. But it's certainly going to be a lot cheaper than this season's squad, you would imagine.
Do you know who could help them? You know who would be really good to help them out in that kind of situation? Jim Duffy.
There's a man who knows how to assemble a squad on the cheap. Even if you give him a budget, he'll still assemble it on the cheap.
Forfar actually play Clyde at the weekend. How do you think that'll go?
Russell McLean has a very good record against Clyde. I remember this because he told me. So
he scored 4.
On the basis that he scored back-to-back hat-tricks, 4 goals for Rusty McLean and a 4-2 win for Forfar.
Yeah, someone I actually fancy Forfar for this one as well. It was interesting though, I mean, let's face it, Clyde's pine bubble thread has just been people being miserable for a long time. Other than that wee spell in the summer where they were quite excited, and rightly so, about what they expect from this season. But see, just reading Forfar fans' comments about how can't wait to get to the football on Saturday. That's class, because actually, like, reading Forfar's thread for the last 18 months, it's been, this is rubbish. Don't want to go on Saturday, blah, blah, blah. But as you're just saying, just seeing football fans saying, can you wait for Saturday? That's, I like that.
Yeah, because there's almost, so we've all been in positions with our clubs where we've been really excited to see them, or we know they're going to ruin our weekend, so you just go and let a wee bit of anger out. But with Forfar, it was just like, Ray McKinnon had sucked the life out of the club. There was just no, they weren't even exciting enough to get angry about. It was just like, well, McKinnon's not going anywhere. The football's dire. We'll probably draw, because I'm pretty sure they drew about 90% of their games last season. So we'll just, we turn up because there's nothing else to do on a Saturday, and probably people were drifting away. So it's really good to have a bit of enthusiasm back. And I quite like Jim Weir. Like, I've always kind of thought he's a reasonably decent manager for that level.
Yeah.
Like, he's...
Yeah, I think so as well. I think so as well. I think he seems like for all I know of him, I'm not aware of him as being a bad egg. I've not heard any negative stories about him. So I do get the impression that I am a wee bit, but possibly both, slightly jealous of Forfar fans being excited about the football on a Saturday. Because I'm certainly not, and I get the impression that you might not be either.
I'm not excited about the rest of the season. It's all kind of stretching out in front of me now. Like, no Michael Ruth. I don't know how long term is, but he's basically the major reason that I go to football. And it's technically not even my job anymore. So I'll just go and watch the snooker instead. I'll get sent down to the Crucible in like April.
Well, Fraser, on that positive note that you're going to the Crucible on a Saturday rather than Dumbarton, let's wrap it there. But Fraser, thank you very much for joining me, and enjoy your football this weekend.
I will do my utmost.
And your snooker.
And my snooker. The football fails, there's always the snooker.
Take care.